There's a weird finality to this. Not knowing what's ahead. Not knowing if anyone will see the words that I'm typing onto my new way over bloated note stock on my phone. Not knowing if John or Isaac made it out. I guess as cheesy as it sounds, this is where faith comes in. To me, it's not really faith in a god. It's more faith in myself? I'm scatterbrained. Sorry. What I'm trying to say is, this elevator has been going down for a long time. I dropped my kit to the side along with my rifle, and I've just been sitting with my back against the wall. I don't know how long it's been, but the clock on my phone's been stuck at midnight on the dot, never changing. Fucking midnight. I've taken to consolidating whatever's left. After the bum rush through the woods, the house, the chop shop, I've got 3 magazines of 5.56, about 90 rounds. Inside some good old ASC mags, the metal ones you see mercenaries using in C-list movies. 1 single road flare, 1 single incendiary grenade. I am officially up Shit's Creek with a fucking spork. A bit of irony I've realized is that regardless of all the $16 a piece window mags I bought, I ended up just hammering the trigger and full auto blasting my way through the entire depth of the house. You can try to make what you think is a foolproof plan, but in the end, once adrenaline kicks your teeth in, you're just along for the ride. Adrenaline. Yeah, I'm starting to feel it wear off now. The blood in my hands is starting to slow down, so they're getting a real bad case of the pins and needles. Exhaustion is setting in. Strangely though, I'm getting warmer. I thought it was because of all that running, but I realized that before I was even running through the house, I could see my breath in the cold air. Now, not so much. Now, this means that either this endless fucking elevator is about to drop right into the magma layer of the earth, or we're entering some sort of area that's several thousand feet under the surface with forced air heating. I really don't know. She has also been sitting there the entire time. Sitting there up against the wall to the left, just out of the corner of my eye. I don't know if she'll disappear if I try to talk to her, so I've just let her be. As much as she's helped me out, I still don't know where she sits in all of this. This is her house. She told me that. But what does that mean? Was she kidnapped? Is she one of those things in disguise? Is she tricking me? I mean, no, probably not. She could have easily led me into a room full of those fucking ghouls when we were back semi-topside. She's led me the right way so far. So, I guess I've got to have faith in my newfound ally. The exhaustion was setting in again. I rubbed my eyes. My corneas felt like they just went 10 rounds with a Golden Glove boxer. The headache has stopped, but I still felt completely fried. In a haze, an indefinitely traveling industrial elevator, the groaning of the gears, the cries of the decades-old cables, struggling to lower it without dropping me. I needed to stay awake through it all. I couldn't stop it. I wasn't done yet. Not yet, but almost. Throughout all the theorization, thoughts of finality, prepping my gear, I heard the wench get slower. It started to groan in an attempt to slow down the elevator, so its poor, stupid, former yet still somehow just as jar-headed inhabitant didn't meet an anticlimactic end via a dead drop. "We're here," she sung out in a low melodic voice. Correction, my newfound, still just as creepy ally. I pulled my kit over my t-shirt, leaving my soft-shelled jacket, slipping my head through and strapping it tight around my waist. I locked my gun's bolt to the rear, slapping in one of the final 3 mags and then knocking the release home. I squared up with the mouth of the elevator, watching the rocky yet strangely metallic surface outside pass by slower and slower. I watched her finally come up to my side out of the corner of my eye. And to think, not too long ago, she was trying to get my redneck friend to kill me. I guess the saying is true. The enemy of my enemy will help me salt and fucking burn them. The elevator shook as we reached our final destination. With an electronic buzz, the cage doors pulled open and revealed it. The yellow dying overhead lights of the elevator did little to help illuminate the area. I was able to see about 10 meters out into the area. I could make out a few details. Firstly, the floor was made up of a dark metal square tile pattern. It seemed to stretch off well past the dark void of the bathed area. Secondly, the black void itself. That's exactly what it was. An impermeable, impenetrable wall of absolute fucking black. It shrouded the area as far as I could see. As however far this chasm stretched, no matter how many minutes I stood there. Remember that natural cat eye I mentioned earlier? Yeah, well, my eyes never seemed to quite adjust to it. And lastly, what I think was a chasm. The echo of our elevator stopping dead and shaking seemed to echo for a while. Hell, even as I finished pondering this shit, I could still hear the metal shake continuing to bounce off however far back the walls went. I'll bet you $5. If this isn't hell, it sure looks real fucking similar. I was gonna need some light. I tried to turn on the surefire light I had attached to my rifle's rail. Nothing. I guess all of the getting thrown into a wall, through a wall, and off a fucking balcony by a goddamn ogre must have shortened and warranted the life on it. Regardless, I still had one more source of light. I slung my rifle around front, and as I reached into my back pocket, I pulled out the road flare, twisting the cap off. It hissed as a burst of red light came out of the top. Voices in the darkness hissed and roared out, sounding like they were just at the edge of the black veil, immediately starting to back up with slapping bare feet. Holding the grip of my rifle in my right hand, I held the road flare out with my left hand and proceeded forward. The room was, as I described, gigantic, and truth be told, I still didn't know how high it was. I got about 20 meters into the area before I was greeted by several large cage-like walls, locked and bolted into the floor. They shot upward towards a ceiling. It was too far for the flare to illuminate. They were metal, with small slits big enough for some fingers and part of a hand to fit through. The kind of caging you'd find on a cattle car. One segment shot leftwards, another rightwards. Both met in the middle and they created a 10-meter wide path leading forward. I gazed at the floor. In worn yellow lettering, it read, Administration. A yellow line at the mouth of the path was drawn right above it. I stepped past the line and immediately I heard voices. Not laughing or mocking this time, but roaring in anger, in spite. A set of footsteps to my right came barreling towards me. Immediately I pivoted. The cage wall shook as between the narrow slits I could see a large figure, a slimy silver body, shoving its bloated hand in vain to try to get me. It didn't work. It just grabbed onto the cage and shook it, roaring into the air. My instincts caused me to pivot towards the thing and aim my rifle. Yet, the voice in the back of my mind reminded me that I only had 90 rounds. So, I'll admit, I stood there, flare in one hand, rifle aimed, and I laughed. Well, it certainly sucks to fucking suck, don't it? A la old Sergeant Walker. This must have enraged the creature because all it did was shake the cage violently. Then another from the left side crashed into the cage wall, began shaking it. Then another one on the right side. The metal was shaking so loudly, I started to become unable to hear myself think, as a chorus of malicious voices and steel came raining down. Dwight. The girl's mind reached out through the sea of laughs and cackles and pulled me back to the surface. I gazed down at the walkway where she stood. She turned to her right and pointed down the path into the darkness. Keep going. She was right, at least for now. They weren't going to be hunting anybody, also for now. I continued down the path, and more than jumped to the cage walls. The darkness became thinner and thinner as I walked down it. All the while, they yelled their evil fucking threats at me. We will wear your skin. The further I went, the more and more I could see the path. The red flickering light in the road flare revealed a set of metal doors, built into a metal wall looking just like the floor, albeit looking much more aged with a reflective surface. Do not hurt us. There were no windows on the doors, just a simple knob on each one of them, and administration written across both of them in faded yellow paint. Dwight. Nolan. I was getting really fucking tired of them saying my name. We will make it long and
Agonizing.
And then, when I was barely 2 feet from the door, they stopped. I honestly paused because of all the years of combat finally caught up with me, and I thought it made me go deaf. It was at this point that I realized I was still wearing my Walker headphones. I pulled off one muff and gazed at the ground. They were still around, but their beady eyes were just staring daggers into me. They stopped attacking the cage wall. They instead backed off slowly and quietly. I looked back at the door. Months of fighting, searching, investigating. Hundreds, if not thousands of rounds expanded. And here it was. Administration. I placed my bets now on whether or not Isaac was right on this being some eldritch horror. I did not want to have to pay him $25 if I somehow made it out of this. Keeping my flare held tight, I reached out for the knob. Stop. Her voice echoed as she jumped in front of the door, causing me to back off a few paces as she stood there. I was more surprised by how fast she moved, or more likely, appeared. Her voice was still echoing. Wait. She only wants to talk to me directly in my head. She had never said anything out loud. Don't look upon it, she said, pressing her back to the door. Now, I'm fairly confident she was some sort of paranormal being, whether it be ghost, demon, or something else. So it made me pause for a second and realize that while she was saying this, there was a very real fear in her voice. We stared at each other. She continued to block the way defiantly. My mouth was paused, waiting for my mind to come up with a response. Why? She withdrew one of her arms and pointed at me. No, behind me. I slowly turned around, fully expecting this to be the moment where she double-crossed me, and a demon from the depths of whatever layer of magma hell we were in would jump out and end me. Instead, I just saw them again. Their eyes, a sea of eyes staring at me through the gaps in the cages. White, beady pupils. The eyes must have been watching me for a while now. All this way up to this. I looked back at her. She continued to point, refusing to tell me what the hell she was trying to say. And I looked back. The eyes just continued to stare. What? I yelled, looking back at her. They're staring, so what? Again, she just refused to answer me, instead pulling her arm back to the door. I continued to stand there dumbfounded. So what? They're staring at me with those beady eyes. Unnatural, twisted, deformed, changed eyes. They stared upon it. They all did. The cogs finally started working in my head again. I put all the pieces together. The house, the lab, the fucking chop shop. The things that changed them. Cut them up, forced them to be these disgusting, evil things and lock them down here and throw them at whoever wanted it next. They knew they weren't going to get out of that cage. They didn't want to. They were just trying to scare me. What's that saying? Gaze too long into the abyss and the abyss gazes back. Stare too long at the dense forest and it will fucking take you. I just tossed the flare behind me, it bouncing and sputtering as it hit the floor. I turned my back to the door, and like always, she was gone. I gripped the doorknob, my heart rate skyrocketed, and my left hand shook. Don't look upon it, I thought. So, what? Close my eyes? Fucking, yeah, sure, great idea. Charge into the belly of the beast with my eyes closed and 3 mags. She was probably leading me into the trap, but she did warn me. But maybe it was all bullshit just to get me running at it with my eyes actually fucking closed like some kind of goddamn mongoloid. Or maybe it wasn't. She's led me right this far. Gotta have faith in her, I guess. I slowed my breathing, shaking my head as I turned the knob. I kicked the doors open with my eyes closed. My hand shot to the angled grip of my rifle, clenching it through the gloves and pulling it tight into the pocket on my shoulder. It was dark, but I could still see the red flare illuminating from the edges of my eyelids, just for a couple of seconds. Then it got dimmer and dimmer and dimmer, then disappearing as I heard the double doors close. It was quiet. Not silent, but quiet. My vision was now more or less gone. My other senses started to come into play. First, hearing. I could hear all the ambient noises of what I think were hospital monitors, a low, steady beep of the heart monitor, and there were others within several meters in front of me. A small echoing of it bounced off the walls, kind of giving me an idea of how big the room was. It wasn't as big as the outside, but it wasn't a fucking closet either. Maybe 30 meters by 30, give or take. Next, smell. I've had the privilege of being able to bitch about a lot of smelly shit in my life. Literal shit, metaphorical shit, and ethical shit. Burning rubber, burning human waste, burning flesh. The kind of stuff that would cut up the inside of your nostrils and send you reeling from the stench. This was worse. Way fucking worse. I physically cringed as I tried to breathe in. It was like an ancient corpse was dug out of a mass grave, shit on, and then set on fire with kerosene. It felt like I was inhaling several tons of fiberglass, and the irony taste that followed told me that it made my nose bleed. And yet, despite whatever my other senses told me about this place, nothing responded. Not to my loud entrance into the room, nothing. I stood there holding my position. I wasn't physically attacked. Yet. And too afraid to move forward of fear of whatever was several paces ahead of me would chew me up, spit me out, then possess my fucking corpse. Like it had done to all the others. Everyone who looked at it. Met its eye in the forest, in this house, in this metal fucking tomb. Everybody. It had taken out their families, killed, kidnapped, or worse. Don't open your fucking eyes, Dwight, I repeated in my head. And it just stood there, eyeing me. I could tell it was watching me. I knew it was. It had to be. My face was twitching with anger and anticipation. I pulled the stock of my rifle so tight I thought my shoulder would have popped out of its socket. This was a standstill. A standoff. Both sides wanting for the other one to make the move. All the emotion, all the anger finally boiled over as I opened my mouth, trying to get the words out. Come on out! A rushed, ragged, aggressive response. But under the circumstances, I could be excused for not being my usual wordsmithy self. It bounced off the walls as my mind quickly rushed to see what I could make of the echolocation. Nothing. No words, no response. No army of demons rushing out to tear me apart. Just the long, drawn-out beeping. I adjusted my rifle to the darkness in front of me, unable to see if there was even a smiling Cheshire creature in front of me, or absolutely nothing. Again, I spoke. I'm right here. Nothing. As a gesture to show how serious I was, I flipped my selector switch to semi. That click, to me, instinctually burned into my mind to tell me, shit's about to go down. The small click, the mechanical safeguard taken off the weapon meant to be 3 pounds of force, was all it needed to go off. What I'm getting at is, it's the international sign for I'm about to shoot your fucking head off. And still, nothing. I stood there, hovering over the trigger well, knowing I had 90 rounds, 90 shots to make it count. No resupply, no armored car to go grab a loose can of rounds from. Nothing. 3 mags, 1 rifle, and a historically aggressive trigger finger behind it all. I'm right here. Stop hiding! Nothing. I'm gonna burn your fucking damn haunted house to the ground, and your haunted fucking forest to ash. Nothing. Come the fuck out. The voice was off, but so was everything else here. It sounded calm, angelically so. Former United States Army Staff Sergeant, born in Chicago, served 10 years before calling it quits. Signed a several $1,000 fixed-rate contract to the Casamouth industry in an attempt to jumpstart his dying career as a washed-up mercenary. It sounded like all different opinions of me mashed together, some praising me, others mocking me, but everything he said was true. How the fuck did they know my middle name? And my fucking pay rate? Awarded a combat infantry badge, March 2011. How in the fuck? For reaching an enemy conflict at the Ghanaian border, failing to save Sergeant Clancy. Offered a spot at the army range. Alright, I fucking get it. The sudden interruption silenced them, and we stood there. They were coming from my immediate front, maybe 10 meters away, maybe 20. With the amount of echo in the air, it was hard to tell. My eyes were shut, but I could feel that whatever it was staring back at me. Does it bother you, Dwight, knowing you could not save any of them? The question was piercing, meant to rile me up, but I could tell it wasn't about the people in my unit that were killed, but the people in the forest. Fine. You want to throw down shots? 2 can tango. Does it excite you every time you take one of them from their families? Every time somebody gets ripped out of their homes and turned into whatever the fuck is in that formerly human cattle pen outside? Does it get you off? Silence. Well? More fucking silence. Say something, god damn it. No. I still don't know if it was answering my question or just being snide. It spoke in the voice of Merkel, the gun shop owner. The forest is a dangerous place, Dwight. Then in the voice of an old woman from the manor, Candace. Hundreds of thousands of people go missing every year, sweetie. These are just the ones taken by the old hungry forces that lay within. And then, in John's voice, call me calculating. Call me... And then, in Theodore's voice, eccentric, but I knew that when my wife went missing. I needed to do something. Theodore? Then in the voice of one of the town's local sheriffs. Not quite your boss, Theodore. He knew exactly what he expected when he arrived here. He has known for a while. He knew about all the workers he was sending to their deaths, trying to build that. Then, in Isaac's voice, overblown log cabin in the middle of Witch's Alley. He also knew exactly what he was doing, throwing you into the middle of the woods. Then, in Garrett's voice, with a 308 bolt action and a shitty four-wheeler. Then, in Roseanne's voice, we feel bad for you, Dwight, hun, we really do. However, I know you saw the missing on the board, and you know bloody well that there are many more people lost to this. Then in the voice of the mother from the bar, Danny's mother, Mrs. Hothfield, I try to scare you off, show you that what's happening is bigger than you, but you wouldn't listen. The forest is a sea of forces. You can't stop. You can't battle. You can only hope to control. Then back to Theodore's voice. Theodore said I was crazy, but I told him I could do it. But it was a fool's errand. It cost me everything, my mind, my spirit, my body, my daughter. That last comment confused me. Up until I felt the girl wrap her arm around my left leg, it was starting to make sense. Her house. This was getting a bit long-winded, but it was getting clearer, yet more confusing at the same time. Some things made sense, some things didn't. Some still don't. A sea of forces? Yeah, there's a lot of weird shit in the woods, but to do this? To do what had to be done to get these people into cages? What did it mean by control? Just stop fucking rambling. Stop trying to spout off some exposition or spin some narrative. You lost somebody. I've lost somebody. Everybody here has. Yes, people go missing every goddamn day, but to do, and I knife hand towards everything around me, that to people, to do all of this, it's a necessity. It's fucking inexcusable, you son of a bitch. The voices began to change into ones I never heard. It was every other word now. Wrong place, wrong time. Bad hand, bad luck, Dwight. It's an evil that must be done. That must be kept beneath the surface. Lest hungry men like Theodore try to uncover and use it. Well, I guess you fucking failed, haven't you? And all it took was a washed-up staff sergeant, a redneck, and some paranormalist, and a couple of months to figure you out. You're committed, motivated, hungry. You didn't get scared, shook. You persevered. You're different. You act like a hero to get to the bottom of all of this. It's the same reason you must realize I can't ever let you leave. My throat ran dry, making it hard to swallow after it said that. My hands started to sweat inside the gloves as I tried to zero in with my eyes closed. You said it yourself. It changed to my goddamn voice. This is it. This is the end. I hope I'll be back. How did it know? Was it surfing the fucking web? Had it heard everything I said? How? No one will find you. No one will realize what's really out here. Theodore will never find the truth, or else he will harness it. The cabin will be burned. Your friends will be saved. And nobody will ever find out what happened to the security guard hired to protect the estate. Then a sound that felt a lot more nerve-wracking this time. It sent a chill up my spine. As from far beyond the double doors, the things began to attack the cage wall again, except this time, not in a smothered, reeled attempt to scare me away, but this time more intentional, jumping at it, pulling and shaking it, throwing their heavy bodies up against the cage walls in an attempt to break them down and to get me. The chorus of screams and noises were muffled behind a door. They wouldn't be for much longer. I didn't know exactly where the fuck it was, or how far it was, but I knew that it was in front of me. The echoing, the sounds, they all came directly in front as I could make it out. A while ago I said, while waiting for Roseanne and Isaac in the armored-up battle wagon, that I feared becoming another casualty, another name on a memorial wall, another missing sign on a corkboard, taken, killed, gone missing, turned inside out, cut up, thrown against the high branches of a tree in a canyon, found in pieces, not found at all, disposed, forgotten, erased. All of this work we had done to get here, all of the fighting to get to the bottom of this, a pointless waste as an army of demons fought to get out of their cage and tear me limb from limb, and a horror at the center of all of it. I couldn't even gaze my eyes upon it. The entire thing was just a bad hand, but I've been playing since the start. I wasn't going to let the story end up like this. This wasn't going to be where the road ended. 65 names alone on that missing persons board, some dating back years, others just a few days ago, let alone thousands that go missing every fucking day, all because of some fight, some struggle, some little game that we're stuck in the middle of. Fuck that. For what I hope was the last time, I flipped the selector switch down to auto. A burst of 5.56 rounds came out of my barrel. The muzzle flash was so bright I could even see it with my eyes closed, giving me some sense of positioning. The horde behind me continued to try to break through, as the voices in front simply continued to scold me. It's useless, stop fighting. You know you want to rest. I adjusted my stance, trying to make sure I wasted as little rounds as possible. Raised my weapon again. This time I held down the trigger, and rode the fucking lightning. My poor fucking AR. God knows how much carbon and gunk is built up on the inside of it, firing mag after mag, but it still pulled through. Clink. My bolt locked to the rear after the last round. I dropped the empty mag and it bounced off the metal floor. I slapped a new one in and sent the bolt home. Stop! You can't win! Voices continued to yell as defiantly as ever, but a little birdie reassured me. They're scared. Keep going, hurry! Another burst of automatic rifle fire as my rifle spewed out all 30 all-American demon-killing tungsten 5.56 rounds into whatever laid in front of me. The mashing and the groaning of the metal doors behind it increased and gotten louder as dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of them now tried to escape. The bolt locked back again, but there was still light coming from my eyelid. My muzzle wasn't firing. It was coming from beyond. Stop! Dwight, stop! Whatever I was firing at, I was hurting it, burning whatever was around. I hoped to whatever God existed as I slapped my last mag in and sent the bolt release home. By now, the things outside the room had gotten louder, more violent. They were enraged. I could hear the cage walls groaning and bending as they tried to kick in the double doors. The voice cried out, "You don't know what you're doing!" The girl cheered me on. "We're almost there. Hurry!" The last magazine. Last burst of full auto. Last try. I shouldered my rifle, held my breath. My rifle's muzzle was now smoking. I could smell the scent of gunpowder smoke coming off my weapon. I pulled the trigger and began to dump my last 30 rounds into the demon that laid beyond my eyelids, as whatever I had done to it so far caused the fire in front to get louder and louder, as the breaking of glass, crashing of equipment could be heard. Clink. Empty. I stood there, breathing heavily as I continued to be squared up with the empty, now useless rifle. Then, the voices, they began to laugh. I fucked up? I failed? 90 rounds at 900 shots per minute. Full auto. Into whatever was ahead of me. And I didn't have enough to put it away. One rifle. One shot at stopping this. Gone. Zip. Done. As the dread of all of it set in, the voices outside grew louder as the breaking of bolts and the crashing of metal could be heard. They were nearly here. This was it. I failed. So much preparation, so many attempts, all boiled down to nothing. No more rounds, no more guns, no more... Wait. I had one last thing. One last ace up my sleeve. I dropped my rifle, hearing the 6 pounds of weapon hit the floor. I slid my right hand to the back of my kit and I pulled the container. A cylinder. Running my hands over the orange diamond on the front of it. I knew what it was. An M14. A fucking incendiary grenade. Filled with phosphorus, benzate, and a whole lot of hate. We used to torch equipment down vehicles. It's not meant to explode. Just heat up and cause enough fire to burn fucking anything. It was even able to burn under fucking water. This was it. My last shot. I don't know what laid ahead, but from the burning I saw underneath my eyelids, I knew this would do something. Maybe put it away, even if it meant the ghouls behind me would lay waste to my ass afterwards. John would be safe. Isaac would keep him safe. And Roseanne would tell the whole world the fucking truth. The sounds of the cage wall segments falling onto the floor, following by the manic screams of it, awoke me from my pondering. With one last determined exhale, I gripped the spoon tight and pulled the pin. Dwight, stop! Stop, Dwight! I don't know how high the room was, but I could tell from it hitting whatever ceiling was above that I had thrown it far enough. Hopefully. The sound of the cylinder bouncing off the roof, then the floor, then to the roof again, until the hissing. The phosphorus. Whether white or red, I didn't check. I didn't care. Both would work. I could see the flare from the top of the grenade made contact with whatever laid beyond. And I definitely heard their screams. Young, old, adult, child, male, female. It cycled through all of the people it had taken. Some I knew, many I didn't. Growing louder than the screams behind me, they began to pound on the door. The fire ahead grew larger and larger. The orange hue upon my eyelids flashed purple, then orange, then fucking green. You fucked everything up. You killed them all. The voices began to melt into a sea of screams. As the sounds and crackling got louder, the footsteps behind me also grew louder, and for a moment, all sound seemed to pause. Before an explosion, a climax, the pressure of the moment implodes and builds up. The oxygen got sucked in, and for a moment, there was a pause. Right before the grenade goes off, right before the trigger is pulled, before the fighting truly begins or ends, there's a moment of clarity. It reached out to me, trying in one last vain attempt, in the voice of Sergeant Clancy. Dwight. In that moment, time seems like it goes on forever. Letting myself be taken, preparing for the end, looking into the void, at this thing that had controlled my life for so many months, caused so much death, so much pain, I answered back to its plea with one single phrase. Gotcha. Whether it was all the equipment that I heard from the beeping that had all been interrupted, whether or not it was the smell of the air mixing with the phosphorus, I, a 200-something pound man, felt myself get thrown back by the sheer force of it all. On a convoy through the box, one of our vehicles was hit, and the gunner was thrown out of his harness and the link had broken. He survived. He was a bit banged up, but he described the descent as a roller coaster without a safety. My back slammed into the double doors. My back plate slammed into me. I landed square on my shoulders, flipping over and rolling. I don't know. It could have been a few feet. It could have been a mile. My eyes remained shut, whether or not I wanted them open. And then, silence. No beeping, no laughing, no voices, no giggling, no haunted reminders of my past, no weird chorus of demonic shape-shifting, voice-shifting demons. Just silence. My body ached as consciousness returned to me. I cringed. The headache I had from earlier had returned. This time, it had gotten promoted to a fucking migraine. My back screamed, my legs felt heavy, and I took all of the force I had to try to push myself onto my feet. But my body gave out. I collapsed right back onto my goddamn face, and got a healthy serving of whatever fucking disease-infected shit was on the floor too. There was a small orange hue beyond my closed eyelids. I could hear the growing sound of crackling flames. The smell had gone, the things had gone. It was just me lying face down, my plate now digging into my ribcage and my throat, blowing out spit and blood from my mouth as I laid face down. Thank you. There she was. Whether a figment of my concussed imagination or here in the flesh, I wasn't alone. Not yet. They're gone. My house is empty. Thank you. Her slow melodic voice helped ease the battle adrenaline and pain currently slugging it out in some kind of painful bare-knuckle match inside my body. Using my right hand, I forced myself to flip over, coughing up various substances as I breathed a little bit easier, with my lungs no longer being crushed by my own weight. My eyes were still closed. My hands rubbed my crusted bloody spittle off of them. I still remained hesitant to open them. Was this a trick? Had it survived and started using her voice to lure me? Had I really won? You can rest now. It's okay. I gritted my teeth as I attempted to sit up. Instead, my abs just screamed out in pain as I fought to lean over. I had to get up. I had to get out. I had to... Fuck it. The clang of my back plate hitting the floor echoed throughout the area. I lifted my head up hard to spit out a loogie, clearing my mouth. I finally laid it right back down. My right hand was holding my chest as I stayed there. All of the fighting, all of the pain, all the runs to town, all the gunshots, all the scares. The sightings in the wood, all the hours I've lost, the Red Bulls, the weeks of investigation. Done. Gone. Finished. All the fighting to stay awake has ended. It was all done. 34 years of age was finally catching up to me. Exhaustion. Weariness. My mind panicked at first. Was this it? Was I gonna die? Was I gonna go in a coma then die? What was gonna happen? I couldn't move. I couldn't get up. I just let myself go. I could rest now. Isaac and John were safe. All of them. And then, as the crackling of the fire began to sound out in the distance, I let the darkness take me. Nolan. I jolted awake in my plane seat, knocking off my old gray digicamo patrol cap onto the floor in front of me. I rubbed my eyes with the meat of my palms and I looked around. What happened? Just a few minutes ago I was on death's door, sucking up and blowing out blood, with most of my body shot to all hell. I could barely breathe without feeling like one of my ribs was prison shanking me. And now here I was, the aisle side seat of a middle section of a large Delta airliner, near the very back of the plane no less, wearing now out-of-service ACUs, a light buzz, and an M16 between my legs. Hold on. I surveyed the plane around me. It was nearly empty. Most of the personnel who had been riding had taken their things and left. The flight attendants were now cleaning up between the aisles, and the last few officers made their way out the side exit, just leaving me and the one and only Sergeant Walker. Started to think you were a corpse. Huh. Jesus, the box really did a number on you, didn't it? Well, get your shit. We've got to get off. Walker heaved a large assault pack with stuff from different equipment, snacks, and things he'd taken on the plane with him. A spare duffel bag, and an M4 strapped to his side. He didn't look any older than I last saw him over 10 years ago. His deep, gravelly accent still sounded the same in its prime, too. I quickly scrambled for my PC, slapping it on the top of my head as I pulled my carry-on from on top of the compartment and I pulled it on. Yeah, gotcha. Roger, Sergeant. Walker scoffed. Why you acting all weird on me now? Huh. You want to be all robotic about shit? Shave your fucking face. Walker crudely quipped as I slung my M16 I fired back. Well, technically, we aren't back in the States yet, Sergeant. The fuck? How so? Technically, an airliner counts as international space. So, until we're boots on the ground outside of the plane, technically, I should smack your smart-ass mouth. Come on, let's get the fuck out of this hotbox. He squeezed past the stragglers and staff and made his way down the plane. And God, it was like 2011 was just yesterday. The plane was stuffy after transporting 200 disgruntled, frustrated, and burnt-out American warriors back across the Atlantic. It smelled of sweat, pain, and nicotine. That technically wasn't allowed on the flight. What was this? Whether I refused to think about it or couldn't, I kept playing along. God, I am fucking hungry, Walter cackled, telling me, God, I should go for a good fucking steak right now. Medium rare. You know what? Rare. So bloody it's still fucking alive. I raised an eyebrow. Are you trying to get food poisoning, Sergeant? Listen, son, after the bullets whizzing, the mortar ducking, and 10 minutes of sleep eating 5-year-old Skittles because the Army just couldn't send us better supplies, digging ranger graves only to move 20 meters to the left anyways? Fuckery. If a steak kills me, Nolan, feel free to write fuckhead on my gravestone. Nah, better yet, just dump me in a koi pond. Don't forget almost overturning a Max Pro because we let a technically legally blind person drive it. Walker stopped dead in his tracks and jutted a finger at me. That was the fucking PL's idea, not mine. So what happens when you always give a fucking military command to a dropout with an associates? As much as he reamed and shit-talked our valiant first lieutenant, he showed the sir nothing but respect. Both of them worked cohesively when they weren't bickering, like a married couple. We dodged a flight attendant beginning to vacuum the floor as one of the pilots tipped his hat, shaking hands with us before we proceeded to the door. You gonna quit drinking, Dwight? I couldn't smother the wheeze that came afterwards. Sergeant, I said I was sorry for your truck. Turns out he didn't forget about our last platoon barbecue because sorry doesn't clean the inside of a door, Staff Sergeant. Come on, let's just get this welcome home horse shit done so we can go eat. I pulled my assault pack up a bit as we rounded the corner, bright sunlight blinding me so much that I had to shield my eyes. So no battalion ball then? Fuck no, we're taking the kids to the steakhouse. I didn't have a comeback because the light from the outside was brighter than I originally thought. Way brighter. So much that I had to blink to adjust my eyes. And yet my memory didn't proceed how I remembered. Instead of a crowd of families greeting soldiers, husband and wives, fathers and mothers, their kids, or even the humming of the plane's engines as they cooled down, I heard birds and the wind. This is odd because I remember the family readiness group was planning some sort of patriotic music on a loudspeaker. So loud that I could barely hear Walker talk. And why would there be birds in the middle of an airport? My eyes finally obeyed as I commanded them to open up. Yet, instead of a New York airport surrounded by fellow Americans welcoming us home, I was in a shack. At least, I thought it was a shack. The sunlight coming from several broken and cracked windows to my right. The walls and ceilings were made up of chipped planks. There was some hints of blue and pink paint on them. Hold up. This wasn't a shack. It was a house. The house. My body was suddenly flushed with adrenaline as I shot up, albeit at the speed of a Parkinson's patient, and still sore. I was back in the small kids' room at the very upstairs opening of the sunken house. Everything is just as I had last seen it. Items knocked down to the side as I rushed through the house. The pack of cigarettes I left on the window was still there, albeit frostbitten from spending the night out there. Was it even only a night? I scanned the room and I saw a few things. The doorway I used to get into the deeper reaches of the house had completely collapsed. I guess the house's structure integrity started to come apart with all the door kicking, floor breaking, and running and gunning last night. Regardless, I wasn't really in the mood to go back down there. Not anymore. I don't know how long I was out for. I still don't. My phone read 11:37 a.m., but I felt way too fresh and healed to have been out for just 10 hours. My face still had some scars from the previous night. Blood all across my face with my shoulders aching from that fall in the library, and still shouldering my AR-15. But apart from that, I was able to walk fine. My rifle, kit, and assault pack, hell, even my fucking jacket, and my now broken Oakleys were laying neatly packed on the bed. Pulling myself up to my feet and slipping my gear on, I scanned the room one more time. failing to see her if she was even there. Before I left, I kicked the bed back to where it was originally, and I took one last good long stare at the house before I made my way out. The deep snow of the outside had begun to thaw as it melted. I took a deep breath of cold yet crisp, clean air of the forest. It still felt ominous, even with the midday sun beating down. I still felt as if behind every tree, every rock, every seemingly empty part of it, laid an assailant ready to pounce on me. It's not really like I could do anything, though. No more magazines, no more rounds. Just an empty rifle and a broken-ass body that should have stopped doing this shit years ago. Surprisingly, my azimuth still worked, though it took a bit of caveman slapping and swearing to get it to turn back on. I flipped through the preset chords I had, pointing back south in the direction of the Casamoth estate, and after one last long stare at the ominous clearing, I limped my way back home. The walk was slow, agonizing, and yet at the same time it was calming and fulfilling. My mind went over the past few months, all the firefights, the mock exorcisms. Then, last night, what it said. You can't beat the woods, only control it. You can dump a mag into the darkness as much as you want, but you'll never really kill it. You can't kill what can't be touched. But sure as shit, it can touch you, kill you, kidnap you, drag you away to an underground lair for the sake of the greater good and saving people. And Theodore knew it. All of it. Theodore called it crazy. Well, I guess we can agree on something there. But he knew something. He fucking knew. He avoided staying in the house. He basically admitted to it in the car. But he also said that he didn't know the truth. I must have looked like a crackhead walking through the woods, spitting, muttering, shaking my head and talking to myself as I walked and looked around out of sheer paranoia. I was so concerned with Theodore that I barely noticed my old Pathfinder friend as I rounded a tree. The same man who had given me the guidance when the chips were down was now squared up to me, meeting my tired, beaten-up gaze with his own. The native. It was around this time that I realized we were about the same size, albeit he was in much better shape than I was. I didn't really take the time to ask his exact measurements, though, as we engaged with was at least 10 tense minutes, the most tense of my life. He held something between a scowl and a grimace, the war paint reflecting the sun off of his skin. Had he come to finish me off? Was he expecting something from me? I wouldn't be able to defend myself. I was at maybe 5% with a completely unloaded rifle. He just simply looked me in the eyes, without saying so much as a word or even moving his mouth. And after what felt like hours, he nodded. Without having spoken to him, I knew jack shit about him, but I knew what he meant. I nodded back, a mutual thank you. And like that, for the first time, he turned and he walked off. He didn't vanish into midair or melt into the wind, but he melted into the forest. The dark, cracked wood of the trees and old leaves hanging desperately onto the branches that covered in snow and frost seemed to merge with his back as he faded into the horizon. The sound of footsteps crunching toward me broke my trance. I found myself looking at the barrel of a gun, specifically the Glock 17 that I had loaned Roseanne the night before, now staring back at me. Does this fall under the category of irony or... "Don't you fucking move," she muttered, standing on top of a small mound of dirt. She had the high ground, the superior firepower advantage. How the tables have turned, Dwight. I exhaled a puff of hot air as my left hand shot up to my temple, rubbing it, then dropping it back to my side. "So, are you going to shoot me for being a chronic asshole, or..." Roseanne cut me off. "You were down there for 12 hours. 12 hours. 12, Dwight. So give me a sign it's you before I use your way of dealing with what could be another shapeshifter, or a fucking demon, or a fucking possessed corpse of you, or anything." I'm not gonna lie. I was initially torn between wanting to slap the shit out of Roseanne and sighing because she had a point. I mean, it was a fucking cockamamie point, but it was still a point. If I was a creep from the woods, I probably would have pounced her, but a point. Do these flesh gates retain memories? She shook her head. "Alright, here it goes. My name's Dwight Anthony Nolan. I'm a former 11th Bravo Fire District infantryman, formerly stationed at the ice-cold death pit known as Fort Drum. I'm a self-diagnosed alcoholic, a certified range supervisor. I've spent the last several months under contract with Kazimoth Industries. I've enlisted your help with what I'm gonna guesstimate was about a week and a half ago, because time here is as convoluted as my last 2 brain cells. Isaac's missing an eye. You're a British Commonwealth immigrant, judging by your accent. You helped me exercise, among other things, a fucking river. Werewolves are real. The giant of Kandahar was a Nephilim. And also, despite all those Ruick drawings in your journal, you keep a way too detailed graphic image of a... Okay. Roseanne backed off a few steps, holding up her hands as she lowered the pistol. She chuckled. You sly son of a bitch. I knew you looked in my journal. I knew it. I shrugged. You take a lot of naps. Only 'cause I work hard, Dwight. You look worse for wear. What happened? My stare was very deadpan, and it involved one long blink. Did you hit your fucking head? I mean, down there, jackass. I gazed back to where the native had walked. He was long gone. Then back down to the slope towards the sunken house, before pivoting back to my locally hired witch. Long story. I'll tell you back at the estate. Just know that it's over. Over? I nodded. Roseanne breathed a sigh of relief as she looked around. Come on. Home is this way. I waited a few seconds before following. How the fuck do you know? We walked for about an hour before we got to the perimeter of the Kazimoth estate, much to my hysterical joy freaking Roseanne out, following it back to the eastern side. We got to the front gate of the estate. I noticed that along the way, while we were gone, they really did a number on this place. The trees were gutted and torn down, sea wire was ripped off the concrete wall and strung around like, as Roseanne put it, an Iraq War Christmas tree. However, regardless of how the mice had played with the cats while we were away, in this case, the mice being demonic ghouls that could chuck grown men several feet, and the cats being a group of misfits armed with the finest operator gear that a guy could buy in a small-town gun store, albeit a very well-armed gun store, run by 2 Belarusians? Armenians? Germans, Europeans, Russians, it doesn't matter. Great. Thanks to Isaac, now I've got them fucking mixed up. Rambling. Sorry. I'm really drunk. That'll become more clear later. Regardless of the show of force, the gate still held. Surprisingly well. Roseanne scanned her eyes across the large metal gate as I approached the keypad. Hello? Anybody there? I pressed the button and shouted. Yes, I shouted into an intercom. I know full fucking well how fucky those headphones are because Theodore either bought the equipment especially high-end or at fucking Walmart. For a moment, nothing came through. Roseanne shrugged to me as we locked eyes. That was until... Well, holy shit. Frank Castle returns from the grave. Marco owes me $20. I stared at the camera stunned. What, you placed bets on whether or not I was going to make it out alive? Hey. Marco was the one who said you weren't going to make it. I challenged him. You mean Merkel? Same shit. Good to see you, Dwight. I knew you'd make it out. You see Tim out there by any chance? John and I saw him on the way back, and by the looks of him, he stole my trucker hat and he was wearing it, so I wanted to get it back. Isaac, open the fucking door. Alright, Jesus. You gotta be so mean. Roseanne and I made our way into the house. John was fast asleep on the couch, passed out with a blanket covering him. Roseanne immediately went over to check on him. Gareth and Merkel were busy cooking something in the kitchen. Isaac came into the living room, and he said, So, what was down there? His question bounced around in my head like a fucking pinball. I still don't know the answer. I pulled my kit off me, dropping it onto the lounge chair where Isaac and others had put theirs. Once again, it became a giant pile of monster killing supplies. I'm not sure. Isaac raised an eyebrow. It said several things. That the woods can't be stopped, that it tried to paint itself as a lesser evil compared to it. And that Theodore knew. Isaac jumped back and pointed at me. Ha! I fucking knew it! That goddamn Roseanne quickly snapped at him. Isaac! He looked confused as she gave him the shush gesture. Roseanne said he'll be fine as long as he gets plenty of sleep and we don't let him get kidnapped again. It would be easy since compared to the last few months, the preceding week was a fucking palate cleanser. Gareth and Merkel took off the next day after I got back. Both the Europeans loaded up their mass amounts of weapons and ordnance back into their van. Gareth himself said something to the effect of, "The woods can still be dangerous, but we did good work. You did good work. You and Isaac are friends. Come anytime. Oh, and tell Isaac if he wants a job besides being your Cyclops, he's welcome at Gareth Arms. Stay well, Sergeant Nolan." I still remember that Spartan-esque grip he gave me before they drove off. Next was Roseanne. What with the woods attacking John's friend's house at one night. But being Roseanne, she protested. Just because we solve one problem doesn't mean there aren't 1,000 more taking its place. Everyone in this town needs something, and this is only going to get stranger after the power vacuum of whatever you riddled down there. I nodded, sitting back on the hood of my SUV, driving my hands into my pockets. You sure you don't want to ride back to town? Like you said, the woods are still haunted. Roseanne looked out towards the open gate, brushed her hair, then stuffed it back under her beanie. She shook her head. "Nah, I'll be okay. Oh, and..." She dug into her bag and pulled out the Glock, handing it to me. I waved it off, much to her confusion. I think we can both agree that the town witch, who just helped me take out an eldritch demon, is going to have a target on her back. Take it. Consider it a form of payment since I'm no longer funded by my boss. Roseanne shoved it back in her bag as she slapped my shoulder. "Pfft, you think I get paid? Huh, funny. No, I do this as a service. Somebody's got to." She rested her hand on my shoulder, staring into my eyes. "Remember, that rich asshole gives you trouble or you need any help, just call me." Despite my warning to Isaac that Theodore was going to be back in less than a week, he vowed to stay with me as long as he could. "Not going to leave you high and dry, Captain. Let's get this place locked down." I spun back in the office chair of the security room, scanning all of the cameras as Isaac nervously scratched the back of his neck. "So, can I drive the ATV?" I'm used to saying this a lot. Had it been X months ago, I would have kindly declined the one-eyed, always buzzed redneck the opportunity to drive an ATV. However, considering the circumstances and the fact that I was likely not going to be employed next week, I pulled open a key drawer and beckoned him. Like I said, the estate was a mess after the War of the fucking Wendigos. It took us nearly 15 clicks into the woods. Not much Isaac and I could do to remove the fallen trees, especially since the two of us were less than motivated to conduct high-octane ATV landscaping for a man who literally chose to live in Demon Alley than we were our first few months here. Roseanne was right, however. The woods are still off. Though the next few days I still went on patrol on the ATV, scanning the perimeter path during the day, and finally feeling safe enough to go out at night. Anomalies still occur. A broken stone archway that appeared on the path caused me to detour around it. After I tossed a branch through it and it came out not diced but minced on the other side, I made the executive decision not to fuck with it after I tossed a rock through it, with the same result. Other things still happen. Isaac said he saw a couple of things like the crab-walking man, who I've now ruled as more or less harmless, a fucking baby carriage, and a staircase. The third one was no longer there when I checked the area. I also get slight glimpses of a green static-looking figure from the Chop Shop house, just out of the corner of my eye, each time seemingly closer and closer, but never too close and never in direct eyesight. It was a weird, nostalgic feeling, if you can call this fuckbin of a gig nostalgic in any sense. Just the good old Kazamoth Estate security doing routine checks. John was getting better and better with the help of chicken noodle soup and Tylenol, and we were patrolling the estate. I finally indulged in Isaac's cultural pastime a few days ago. We were on the porch. The sun was setting, providing a warm orange hue that bathed the two of us as we sat back in a couple of wicker chairs. Isaac had a glass of Jack. I had a glass of Corona, or, as known by my colloquial name for it, hot piss. We must have sat there for hours, sitting back, legs crossed, my rifle across my lap in case the woods wanted to go one last round. But it never came. And despite our banterish history, it was silent. A calm feeling of acceptance and finality to this. A friendship that was literally based on two motor mouths chatting it up on a forest path. That was, well, until Isaac started talking. You owe me $25. I turned to him, confused. How fucking so? Isaac took a big swig of his Jack before continuing. Remember, we placed bets? I scoffed, then laughed. Listen, I don't really know what was down there. I never got a good look. So, it's a draw, Isaac. There's no fucking draw on bets. We shared a fake tense stare before falling back into buzzed chuckles. I took one last sip of my beer, emptying it out and tossing it across the porch onto a bucket. I'm gonna miss you, brother, Isaac said with his one good eye slightly glossed over, sitting back, his hands holding the bottle in his lap. I exhaled, sighing as I sat back. This was probably our last time together. Yeah. So, what are you gonna do after this? I shrugged. Go home. Home? Chicago. Buy some booze, write an autobiography like every other vet, and live off the royalties. I turned to Isaac. You? Stock market. I hear the Dow Jones is pretty good this time of year. I shook my head in disbelief. Bull fucking shit. Isaac cackled and nodded. Yeah, you're right. Probably just gonna take that Latvian's offer and go work for them. The little banter I had with my friend would soon come to an end, however. This was the very last day, the day before Theodore came back. Isaac finally left. He sported one of the assault packs I had given him, packing up his tent and strapping it to the top. Despite my offers to drive back to town, he argued, if I could walk 700 miles across 2 damn states, I could make it to town on my own. Besides, you and the kid need to prepare yourselves for him tomorrow. I nodded, kicking up a bit of gravel as we both stared off into the evening sky. Isaac turned back. You sure you don't want me here in the trenches with you when he comes? No. I got a feeling he's going to pull something tomorrow, and I don't want anyone to get caught up in that who doesn't need to be. Besides, you paid enough on this little adventure. I tapped the bottom of my eye, referencing Isaac's wound. Albeit, with the help from Roseanne, it looked a lot cleaner, with a proper eye patch over it and a new bandage. Hey, I gave it back to the suckers. Good luck, Sergeant. And just like that, the Kazimoth Extermination Squad, the finest members of a paranormal hunting group I had assembled and fought with, I worked with for the last few months, was back down to just me. The evening perimeter check was probably one of the most isolating damn trips I had ever taken. The sky was a bluish purple as I drove my ATV down the trail, soaring over potholes and past fallen trees. I stopped at the northern bend, the halfway point, where motion detector 6 was. I parked my ATV, leaving it running as I scanned the low-light area. I saw the deep holes which the now destroyed ATV was trying to make as it revved its wheels to try to get out of there, the tree I shot meters ahead attempting to shoot the creatures. Gazing onto the now clear path ahead, my mind often goes back to that night, surrounded by dozens of them, all laughing and stalking me, that creature with its white and yellow eyes staring at me in the rain, now gone. I looked out to the north, over the slope that led down into the woods, the ocean of trees that lay beyond it. Man, I sighed, I need a vacation. Hey! After nearly 6 months of this fuckery, my skeleton, ironically enough, nearly jumped out of my skin from the sudden greeting. I turned back to my left, and I was greeted by none other than Tim. Turns out, Isaac was indeed right. Even if he was half blind, Tim, among other things, bore Isaac's trucker hat. I stared at him for a few minutes. Had anyone seen me, not knowing about my time here? They'd have thought I was fucking insane. To be fair, I still think I am. Lost most of my sanity in that place. Suffocated by the trees, talking to fucking skeletons. If this is insanity, I gotta say, at least it's entertaining. I turned on my engine to leave, but I stopped, laughing as I shook my head from the idea. I reached to the back of the ATV's container and pulled out one of my electronic headphones. I walked over and placed it on Tim's head over the trucker hat. I stepped back. Real fucking operator. Goodbye, Tim. Even with the loud roar of my ATV's engine, the sounds of the fleeting winter woods, I still heard one solitary word. Narc. The day had arrived. I woke up at 4 a.m., got cleaned up and got my gear consolidated by 5. There was a monitor on the desk of the security room, waiting with a fresh can of Red Bull by 6. Theodore arrived in a black SUV, nearly identical to the one parked outside, along with several vans, and a fucking truck of, judging by the Kazimoth Industries logo on it, the old backup that Theodore talked about. So, it was true, huh? I chuckled inside as I slid out of my chair, clipping my 5.7 holster to my belt. I chugged my Red Bull as I headed outside. Even if it was his estate, his home with his son in it, I still felt like the old town sheriff walking out to meet the new bandits as they rode into town. Literally, big iron on my hip, too. I lightly kicked the door open in front of me as I called back into the house. "John, your dad's home." It took him nearly 20 minutes to come join us outside. Whether it was from still being ill or not wanting to see us flee the coop papa, I still don't know. The empty can flattened underneath my boot as I stepped out onto the porch, meeting the group of uninformed individuals, joined by none other than the long-haired, sweater vest-wearing millionaire, possibly billionaire, Theodore Kazamoth. A long stare-down ensued, as he was backed by several guards, all in back crew tops and bottoms, belts, caps, and most importantly, armed. Their eyes shot to Theodore, then to me. My eyes stayed on Theodore. My hands were shoved in my pockets, mostly because I really wish I bought 2 Red Bulls. Heart attacks be damned. The stare-down was broken up as Theodore's son walked up alongside me, and the previous malice-filled stern look on his face melted, more so forced back, as he walked over to hug his son. "Dwight, it's good to see you." Theodore crossed his legs at his desk. Mind you, the one that still had all the broken pieces and holes in it from my little raid. I stood in front, arms crossed, as several C industry staff members worked to force the heavy filing cabinets back upright. Theodore maintained his grin, however, and honestly, after all the shit here, I wasn't fazed. "I see you've kept things under control. I honestly had to work not to laugh at it. Yeah, holding down the fort without you has been an experience, boss." Was it productive? Very. The tone and smile came after, however, did make me shiver a bit. My shareholders and I have big plans for not just the estate, Dwight, but the company, these woods, the town, and more. Big changes are coming. All for the better, I assure you. I gave a fake smirk and nodded. Just as the employees finished and walked out, Theodore's smile disappeared along with mine. He slid onto his feet, brushing up against the broken section of the desk, which caused one of the upper corners to literally fall off. Theodore snapped back to his feet, kicking it away as he brushed his forehead. "Oh, Dwight, what am I gonna do with you?" He chuckled. The evil motherfucker from the talk in the car was back. Zip tie me, bag me, drag me, shoot me, and leave me in a shallow grave? He shook his head. No. Contrary to what you might think, I can't just do that. Theodore held his hands behind him as he walked over to a large set of windows behind his desk, staring off into the woods. Outside, dozens of workers began to install new security wire, along with lights, cameras, and set up huts along the perimeter wall. Your little blog series really saved you. Had it not been for half of the fucking internet knowing about you, I really could have just zipped, bagged, and shot you. I chuckled out loud, earning a scowl from him that was so fucking satisfying. Mind you though, back to that thing in the metal layer, how I knew too much, how I needed to be smothered, how I really wanted to ream him and rip him apart, press his scrawny ass neck against the damn wall and start interrogating him. But then I remembered what the thing also said. Theodore would try to exploit whatever was down there if he caught wind of it. What I'm saying is, I better not say anything, than allow the evil fucking corporate douchebag money to catch whiff. Well, you'll be happy to know that you no longer have to bear the title of security officer hired to protect the forest estate, Dwight. My arms dropped to my sides as I pondered what that could mean. Theodore opened one of his drawers, pulling out a tablet with a very, very long form letter written on it. Without going into too much confidential financial details, Kazamoth Industries had decided that, quote, due to my dedicated service to the company and the estate, as well as the Kazamoth family, and after considering the consequences and benefits to my long-term health, my contract was being bought out. Basically, I was fired, and with the next what would have been 5 years worth of pay being wired to me, along with a nice bonus. It was a lot of money. A lot of money. Deep, deep 6 figures. I can finally fucking retire kind of money. The kind of money they give you to shut the fuck up and go back to Chicago. It was the kind of situation where I should fight it because they're trying to cut me out, but they did. And what was I gonna do? I was no longer legally allowed on the property. I was no longer a member of the company. You don't say no to a contract buyout. You can only nod your head and accept. It's out of your hands. I was no longer security guard Dwight Nolan. I was just Dwight Nolan. What I'm getting at is, despite all the internal arguments I had, all the reservations I had for just leaving things the way they were and allowing Theodore to do whatever the fuck he wanted, begrudgingly, whether I wanted to or not, Casimoth Industries sent me a 401k plus. Emphasis on the multiple pluses. So I took my ball and I went home. There's not much I can do now. I said goodbye to John and the kid gave me a final hug. I, in return, a still in contact pair of Oakleys, and we parted ways. Not before being escorted out by several Casimoth security officers, as Theodore watched from the porch. By 10 a.m., I was being shoved out of the opening in the perimeter wall, onto a gravel path that I had seen so many times. Then, with a slow crawl, a final heaving metal thud, the gate closed. I was free. Unemployed, but free. I beat myself right the fuck up about it. I still am. I was a fucking coward. Whether or not I braved the things under the house, I allowed Theodore to get exactly what he wanted. I let them just kick me out of the land I was warden of. And I went home. But I had no choice. Did I? Yes? No. Sorry, like I said earlier, drunk. I took another hard shot of vodka at the pub at the edge of town, the same one that I had visited months ago. The alcohol hit straight away. My head buzzed as I turned toward the corkboard. The board that was filled with 48 missing cases a few months ago now had 65. That's because the locals now included hikers, tourists, truckers, cops, and more. I gritted my teeth as I bit down the guilt, turning over my glass, overpaying the bartender. I was cut out. I couldn't do anything. I repeated these words as I wandered out of the bar and down the road. The town still seemed pretty ominous, much like the woods. Even after the ghouls were dealt with, there were still plenty of mysteries and plenty of problems. However, I wouldn't be around to deal with any of them. I couldn't. But I wasn't going to let Theodore and whoever else just run wild in this place while I was gone. I opened up the worn brass mail slot of Roseanne's house. I slipped an overstuffed envelope through. It was late at night. The moon was up in force. I wasn't going to wake her up and hand her what would just be useful in the morning. What was in the envelope, you may ask? Oh, you know, printed transcripts of the entire series, detailed logs of the estate house, scavenged files from the security room, and despite how Theodore may have tried, a still intact hard drive from the computer. I don't have all the answers. Fuck, I have very few. I don't know what was in the darkness of that house. I don't know who exactly that girl was. I don't know what Theodore's gonna do. And I still don't know what the fuck was in that cellar door. And if I'm not gonna be around to find out, then those who will, hopefully will find out. Roseanne's young, motivated. She's hell-bent on helping this town. And if Isaac and those Soviet bloc lads are still around, then they'll be on it too. Bet on it. They'll be there to help her. This is where I would say goodbye. I walked back to the parking lot pub, gazing at the night sky as I called a taxi company. I was way too drunk to try to drive anything back to the nearest airport. And like hell am I getting a hitchhike from a stranger. It'll be 37 minutes, sir. Great. Leave my drunk ass here for that fucking long? Good thing I don't have any of my weapons. I started to type everything in this entry, from the elevator to now. Eating away at the minutes, hoping each passing car was the cab to finally take me home, bobbing and weaving on my feet. And, despite being in a clear parking lot, maybe it was my mild deafness, my buzz. Mr. Nolan. The voice was cool, calm, smooth, calculated, and with some accent I really can't put a finger on. And yet, maybe it was my mildly drunk state or my heightened sense of paranoia. I hopped off the small concrete Jersey barrier I was on, turning to the man. He was older, maybe in his late 40s or early 50s. He wore a dark blue pinstripe suit, with a black detailing over it. I eyed him up and down as I ran my hand over my knuckles. Alright, who the fuck are you? Easy now, soldier, easy. I just want to talk, he said, laughing. My hands twitched as I eyed him up and down, then scanning the parking lot for what I was sure was an ambush. Yeah. Everyone wants to talk nowadays. Who the fuck are you? He gave me a small smile as he faked offense, giving a fake scoff as he put his hand over his heart. No need for such hostility, Dwight. I come not as an enemy, but as a friend. My hand cocked out of confusion. Friend, how the fuck do you know my name? And also, yeah, I ask again, who the fuck are you? He was holding out his hand. My name's Xavier, Mr. Nolan. Your actions in this town have not gone unnoticed. I raised an eyebrow. You've been watching me? The man laughed, retracting his hand. Many parties have, Mr. Dwight. Many. I simply represent one that wants to extend a helping and cooperative hand to someone with your resume. Oh boy. So what do you want? The man straightened out his suit, cracked his neck, and stood there. He was short of my height, maybe 5'11" or 6 foot. You've built quite the rap sheet. 4 combat deployments, 10 years in the military, and now first-hand encounters with the unnatural. I'm interested in your skills. This caused me to burst out laughing. I should have fucking known what was coming. Yeah, look, Xavier, I appreciate Blackwater having the courtesy to come knocking on my door, but it's about 5 years too late. I finally got enough money to retire. This confused him. Blackwater. Oh, no, you're mistaken me, Mr. Dwight. I'm not with any private military company. Not at all. I represent a group backed by many world agencies, with the trust and goal aimed not at monetary gain, but at humanity's safety. So what, an Area 51 kill squad? He chuckled, resting one of his hands on the pocket on the inside of his jacket. No, not exactly. Like I said, we're not one of any government. I crossed my arms. Yeah, well, look, Xavier. The man nodded. You know full well what's been going on. So I appreciate the offer, but I'm in no real mood to jump right back into chasing demons into a dark forest. Xavier held on as he nodded, showing he understood. Understandable, really. I agree, take all the R&R you need, Mr. Dwight. But know this. Dark times are coming, Mr. Nolan. There are things happening all over the world, whether you like it or not. Your tenure at the Kazamoth Estate has been dragged into something that you might not so easily get out of. When you make up your mind, give me a call. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I pulled it out to see new contact added, Xavier. This earned a look of shock from me, as I was at a loss for words. Who the fuck are... I turned to ask him a question, but he was gone. Mind the fact that I only looked away for a couple of seconds, and I would have heard him run off, the fact that we were in the middle of a fucking wide open parking lot. I wanted to pursue him. I wanted to ask him what he meant. What was coming? What was happening? But before I could, the horn of the taxi loudly beeped as it pulled up to my side off of the street. This probably wasn't the ending you wanted, and I'm sorry. I didn't get all the answers. I got cut out of the mystery, and honestly, even with Xavier's offer, I don't really know what I'm going to do from here. All I have to say is 250,000 a year ago went missing. Some cases going cold, others without a trace, sometimes turning up in unexplained ways, unexplained conditions, and then others not at all. There are powers that be that would like to see them forgotten, brushed under the rug and never to be thought of again. It's our duty to remember who they are, and to never stop looking for them. If you hadn't got this already, this is probably my last entry. I don't know when or if I'll be back. I don't know if I'm ever going to press call on Xavier's contact. What I do know is, you've been with me for the long haul, and for that, I thank you. This has been Dwight Nolan, former U.S. Army Staff Sergeant, formerly the security guard hired to protect the damn Forest Estate. Stay safe, guys. I'll see you around. So we finally got to the end of that really fucking good and long story. I liked it. I think that's probably the longest story we have ever done on this channel. I think the closest we came was maybe the gas station, but that's still ongoing. So probably the gas station, but this one is a second, and boy oh boy, was it just on point. Make sure you go give love to the author through the link in the description. Go to his Reddit, upvote him, give him gold or whatever you do on Reddit. I really don't know. But while we're here, I want to thank all of the lovely and amazing patrons currently listed on screen right now. Dan R, Neophyte Games, Chaos X, JY, Pyromancer, Hayden MH, Ethan A, Daniel H, Maximilian Charles P, GoGo Cute Puppy LLC, Young Sykes, Dark Side of the Bear, Revenik, Paul T, and Mr. Swiston. Please consider becoming a patron for a backlog of Patreon stories, which I'm going to be starting up again next month, if I have the time for it. And you get your name read out by me. What could be better than that? And it really does help keep the channel alive. Thanks.